Montana, 1897. Winter in these parts came not by numbers in the calendar, but by the voice of the wind, sharp like a shout of fate. It came from the plains, dry and prickly, and it was clear that cold, debt, and the hardships of survival lay ahead. Evelyn Whitmore's hut clung to the rotten timbers and the hope of a young woman who was not accustomed to give up even in the face of the despair that came with that winter. By evening, the snow had risen to the doorstep, and the wind howled like a beast smelling weakness. There was a letter on the table, as there always was. It was crumpled with a dirty print in the corner. The air above it was heavy, like the hearth in a deserted cabin. Evelyn wasn't reading, she was remembering. The letters had long ago been etched into her head, but her eyes still reread the lines as if they might be different. Evelyn. The last installment of tuition is due by the 15th. If I can't make it, I'll come back. There's no work here. Food's running out. There's no point in waiting. She put the letter aside and sat silent for a long time. The stove crackled. The boots by the door were dry. The wood was almost exhausted. 3 times this month she had borrowed money from the shopkeeper without telling anyone. She still had her pride, but pride doesn't burn the stove. And her sister's letters sounded more and more like someone who was ready to give up. Evelyn wasn't soft. Life here didn't allow her to be. Anyone who started the day with a prayer ended it with a shovel in hand. Still, when there was another knock on the door, she froze. The knock was soft but sure. Once, then another. Without asking, without panic, like a man who knows he will be opened. It's open. The wind entered first, with dust, snow, and silence, followed by James Ward, a young, tall man, broad shoulders like a fighter, wet to the bone, but there was no hurry, no request from him, just a look of directness and intensity. The last one, like the finale of a story where there would be no more words. He stood there as if he'd never left, but she knew he had. The day he should have stayed. He knew it too, and that's why he didn't make a move. "You shouldn't have come," she said. He nodded, saying, "I knew you'd say that." She did not move away. The air between them was dry like a closet where old salt was stored. It's been many winters, not one letter, no news, only silence, which draws out the years like the wind draws heat from the walls. "If you've come for forgiveness—" "No," he interrupted. "I came to see if you needed help." She looked at him as if he were someone who had once been called something else. She smiled, a short smile, without joy, the smile that comes to those who are no longer waiting for help. "From you?" she asked. He didn't look away. "I know how hard this is for you." Her eyes narrowed. The words hit the spot, the one she'd been hiding even from herself. Maybe he really did know, or maybe he was just guessing. She didn't give herself license to believe. "Go away," she said. He paused for a moment. He nodded, not as a farewell, but as an acknowledgment of something that could not be changed. Then he turned and walked away. The snow took him at once, as water takes a stone. He almost disappeared into the whiteness before he stopped. His shoulders shook. He turned around like someone still carrying something on his back, a lot of words, a memory. But he didn't say anything, just stared for a few seconds. And then he disappeared for good. She didn't close the door right away. She watched him disappear. The snow quickly covered his footprints. The wind died down as if waiting. The letter lay on the table, but her eyes were empty. Where resentment had dwelt before, there was now only something resembling weariness. She went back to the table, but she didn't sit down. just stood there until the blizzard spoke again, and behind it, the night that knew the name of everyone who had ever hoped in vain. Montana, 1881. James and Evelyn were just kids back when things were simple. When summer didn't mean drought and winter didn't mean hardship. When time wasn't measured in letters, but in steps to the creek. They were 11. She had bare heels, always dusty. He had abrasions on his cheeks and an eternal desire to run farther than he should. They knew the river. They knew the trails. They knew where the grass was softer. They jumped over logs, rolled down ravines, rolled in the grass until the sun was hidden behind the hills. And they laughed a lot. They were happy and happy together. Sometimes he waited for her outside the barn and threw pebbles at her window. Sometimes she brought him bread and salt, even though she knew her mother would scold him. Neither of them said the word love, but they both knew it was something close. One day, toward evening, they were sitting by an old willow tree. She was pulling blades of grass out of her hair. He was looking at the water. They were silent for a long time. His palm lay next to hers, not touching, just close. "Have you ever thought of leaving here?" he asked. "No," she said. "Do you?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." "Where would you go?" he thought, squeezed his fingers, but didn't touch her hand. "It doesn't matter, as long as you're not alone." She didn't answer, but then it was time to go home, and she left when she heard that he could stay a little longer. He stayed under the willow tree until it was dark. Several years passed. They never reminisced about that evening. But as the years passed, they naturally began to see more in each other. He became more reserved. She became more firm. Once, when one of the neighbors called her names because of her father, James hit that kid. Then he lied to her that he'd just slipped and hit a rock. They were firm friends. They didn't kiss, but every spring he showed up in their yard without a word, helped haul water, fix the gate. He was just there when they needed him. When they were 17, he came again. It was midday, the dusty road, the heat, the empty yard. She was kneading dough. He stood in the doorway for a long time. "I'm leaving," he stated. She wiped her hands on her apron. She looked straight ahead. "Why?" "Because it's all jammed up in here. Because if I stay, I'll be like everyone else. Because if I leave, maybe I'll be me." "What do you want me to do?" He was silent. Then he said, "For you to come with me." Silence. The furnace crackled. She only shook her head. "I have a sister here. My mom's sick. I can't. And I don't want you to go. I don't understand why now. I need you." He didn't argue. He glanced toward the garden where he had once caught her by the scythe. "All right," he said. "Goodbye, Whitmore." And I left. Without a backward glance. No promises. She didn't go out after him. She just looked out the window at the dust on the road, and she knew he wouldn't be back soon, if he ever did. When his mother died that winter, he was somewhere else in another state. Evelyn didn't write. There was no one to write to. Only in some dreams he was still sitting under that willow tree, and his hand was close enough to touch. Montana, 1897. The snow never stopped falling. It lay on everything like indifference, without a sound, without a request. By morning, the doorstep was covered with snow, and there was enough firewood left for 2 days. Evelyn woke with numb fingers. The stove was cold, like a body that no one had embraced. She lit the fire silently. No thoughts, just one at a time, chips, thin branches, dry bark. The flames breathed. She didn't. After James's visit, the cabin felt more cramped. It was like he was still there, but invisible. Like the air was now divided into before and after. He didn't say anything important, but his appearance changed everything. She remembered how he stood, how he hadn't tried to persuade, how he'd just stared. And that look had been everything she'd feared and everything she'd wanted. The wind howls outside. Somewhere something creaks. Maybe a shutter. Maybe an old faith. Evelyn puts on her coat, tightens the belt around her waist, picks up her rifle. Gotta go to town. We have to get flour, salt, just to get away from the house where everything reminds her of him. The snow lay flat, without a trace of life. The horse walked cautiously, breaking the snow beneath his hooves. Evelyn didn't push him. She didn't care how long it took. By noon, the rooftop showed in the white haze. Bozeman, a town where no one likes it, but everyone knows who has a which window light. She dismounted at the bench, tied the reins to a cast-iron hook, and entered. It was warm inside. It smelled of dust, tobacco, and other people's talk. "Whitmore?" someone on the left said, snickering. She didn't turn around, but she knew the voice. Orville Peck, speaking even in his sleep. "I hear someone's back in the neighborhood," he said, coming closer. "They say James Ward was seen at the North Gully." Evelyn silently placed the bag of flour on the counter. "Do you think we should watch out for him, or are you glad?" He says it as if quietly, but for all to hear. She looks directly at the salesman. "A bag of salt." He nods like a dog. Sure. Orville won't let up. I think it's weird. He came back after years. What does that mean?" She turns around, looks Peck straight in the face. He shuts up. "And I think, Orville, that you think too much for someone who has lived so little." He chuckles but doesn't say anything else. She comes out, picks up the sacks, loads them onto the saddle. Her hands are freezing again, wind in her face. It's snowing again. Easy, no effort, as if it had never stopped. On the drive back, it's not the words she's thinking about the look in James's eyes, about the way he stood on the doorstep, never taking his eyes off her, that he'd shouted, "You don't have to go through this alone," and about how nothing in the world is given for nothing, not even memories. The snow was loose, heavy. It crunched under his hooves. Evelyn rode in silence. The bag was pulling on her shoulder. Flour, salt, other people's conversations. The day was slipping towards dusk. The air was blue, and the forest in the distance was an even gray band, as if drawn in charcoal on old paper. When she pulled up to the house, she could see that someone had been here recently. Footprints on the porch. Not an animal, a person, one. There was something dark on the board, a hairpin, old, broken. It was hers. It was hers. She'd lost it years ago. James found it, so he's been saving it all this time. Next to it is a rolled-up leather pouch. Inside is money, a wad. Not much, but enough to close the debt and not borrow this winter. She looked at it for a long time. She didn't take it. Didn't understand why. What for? That same evening, a little later, she got on her horse and rode off. The old ravine was her destination, a place they had frequented when they were children, where they hid from the rain or just watched the sunsets. There was a bonfire, a low one. The fire licked the black walk. He sat back. His fingers moved slowly over the flames. He heard it, but didn't turn around. "Found it then," she said. He nodded. "I didn't think you'd come back." "Did you think I'd take it quietly?" He looked at her, calmly. "Known with it. But I was hoping you would." She stepped closer. The snow crunched under her boot. "Why? I don't understand. Why?" He did not answer at once. He threw a splinter into the fire. "Because I have them, and you don't. I didn't ask for it." You don't have to ask if you can see it in your eyes. You need them more than I do." There was a pause. The fire snapped. The wind touched the branches. Night crept across the sky, thick as soot. Then she shook her head, sharply like a cutoff. "Do you do everything like this?" "Silently. You show up out of nowhere, pry into my life, and then you expect me to swallow it all." He didn't answer. He just stared, no guilt or pity in his eyes, as if he knew it would be like this. "I don't want you, James. Not you, not your money." Evelyn pulled a pouch from her sinus. She tossed it beside the cauldron. It fell with a thud, as if it were filled with stones instead of money. He didn't call out. He did not rise. Only reached for the splinter as if it were the last word he had not said. She walked back to the horse. Slowly. Snow up to her ankles. The cold climbed up her sleeves. Her heart was pounding, not from resentment, from the fact that it wasn't like it used to be. He's a stranger. He doesn't even know her. She didn't believe his act was honorable. Although maybe she was in doubt, talking to herself. But there's no turning back time. Things are different now. The morning began with silence. No wind, no blizzard outside the window. Only the creak of floorboards and the fire in the stove, which crackled as if it wanted to say something. Evelyn woke up with a heaviness that hadn't gone away in days. Everything in her seemed to shift, but nothing had changed. The hairpin lay on the table. The last time she'd seen James, she'd tossed him his money pouch. She took the bucket, went out for water. The well was covered with a thin layer of ice. The ice cracked under her hand, just as something in her had cracked once before the day he'd left. He left when my mother was very ill, when Abigail was still a child, when the earth needed a hand and she stood alone. He promised to be there for her, to be her best friend, her rock. And then he just disappeared. What's more, there was no letter, not even a rumor, just an empty space by the door, and her anxious thoughts at night about his fate. And now he's back, with the money, with the things he kept. As if you could do that, abandon it, and then come back and spread out on the porch the things that should make it all right. And his silence irritated her temper. That afternoon she was fixing the roof. Old boards, nails, hammer. It was hard on her hands. So was her heart. By evening he came. No sound. He was just there, where the light was coming from the window. Axe in hand. He gestured toward the barn. She nodded. He went to chop wood. Not a word. Only the sound of a blow on a log. He spent the entire evening on the case. Didn't ask. Didn't explain. When he'd stacked the logs, he left as quietly as he'd come. Back to the ravine. She knew that. He always went that way when he didn't know where to go. She looked at him, and her chest burned. Why had he come back? Why was he helping? Why now? She didn't sleep that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing the silence, thinking about how he had once left because he was young, because he wanted to be somebody. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe he dreamed he could make money, see life in the South or the West, and come back a hero. She didn't know which of those things was true, but she did know that she was staying here. She was lonely and hard, and that realization was the worst of it. The next evening he came when the stove was already burning. She sat by the window with her legs tucked up. She wasn't expecting him, but she wasn't surprised by his silhouette behind the glass. He stood at the door for a moment, then came in without asking permission. He closed it behind him, pulled off his hat, shook the snow off his shoulders. "Can I sit down?" he asked. She didn't answer, but shifted. He sat down against the wall, away from the fire. The silence was such that he could hear the snow falling from the roof. "Evelyn, I was young," he said, looking down at the floor. It didn't seem so important then, like life was endless, like there was always time to explain, to apologize, to come back. He spoke uncertainly. It was as if he were pulling out old thoughts, long forgotten. "I fell in with a bad crowd. At first it was like a game, fast money, campfire talk, confidence that we were smarter than everyone else, youthful exuberance. That's where I found a use for myself. I was quickly accepted, and I entered the circle of trust. Then it was too late. They started looking for us. They almost got us once. We ran for a week. 2 of us were missing. I stayed. I stayed, because there was nowhere else to go." He ran his palm over his face. He took off his hat and put it on his knees. His hands were trembling. "I didn't kill. I never did. We took from whoever had it. Merchants, officials, rich men with expensive wagons, stations, sometimes empty houses. Yeah, I did it all for one thing. I wanted to save up, to come to you not empty-handed, so you'd look at me and realize I wasn't just some kid who ran away, that I came back a man." She sat there without moving. The flames in the stove crackled. He was silent. There was nothing more to say. "Why didn't you write?" she asked. He looked away. "Because I was afraid you'd answer. I was afraid you'd ask me what I'd do. I didn't want to lie. I couldn't. We moved around a lot with the gang, and it was all too complicated to explain." She nodded. Once. Tears welled up in her eyes. And then it was clear. There was truth between them now, bitter as ash on her lips. He stood up, paused at the door. Then he walked away. Not toward the ravine this time, just into the night. She stood alone, mulling over what she had just heard. Late in the afternoon came the rumors. The shop said there'd been a raid on the North Road. Someone was killed. They said the raiders were men they'd been looking for a long time. Someone gave a name. Somebody whispered that James might have been involved. Somebody saw him driving that way the night before. Orville looked into Evelyn's hut. After talking and explaining the reason for the visit, he said, "People are asking. They think you might know where he is." Evelyn replied that she didn't know and wasn't interested. She closed the door. However, her face could give away her excitement. Orville the chatterbox could see it. She stood at the window. For a long time. She clutched the edge of her dress in her hands, as if something depended on it. She didn't believe he was there. He'd said this life was in the past. He was speaking to her sincerely. There must be some mistake, but she realized it wasn't whether she believed it or not that mattered. If they were looking for him, if his life of crime was following him, it was bound to be trouble. He's on his own now, no gang, no protection, only with the truth he told her, and with a town that's starting to whisper. At dawn she set out for the ravine, in the saddle, with her rifle behind her back, in a cloak soaked with smoke. Even her horse knew the ways by heart. The snow crunched under her hooves. The ravine was the same as before. The slopes, the dry branches, the depression under the cliff. A place where they had played as children, a place no one else knew about. She dismounted, carefully down the slope, where the ground was still loose, even in January, where there was a place to hide and something to hide. However, she did not find him on the spot. His boot prints were there. They were especially clear at the root of an old willow tree. There she saw something else. Under a thin layer of snow was a bundle, a tarp, a belt, the smell of metal and leather. Inside is a rifle, clean, dry, and a chest, shabby, heavy. She opened it, out of curiosity and a gut feeling that maybe he wanted her to find it. There were few valuables inside, a bar of gold and money, a lot of money. Evelyn closed the chest at the same instant. He had kept this. He'd left this. Here. For her? Just in case? For payback? Questions flashed through her mind. I buried it back up. It's exactly as it was. No trace, like nothing had ever happened. Without thinking what to do, she decided to try to keep looking for him and headed for Bozeman. The city was silent, like before a storm. People said hello with a nod. They spoke more softly, turned away faster. At the bench was Orville. Next to him stood a man she did not know, face gray, cold, uniform, no insignia, but with a poise. He watched people the way those used to searching do. They were talking quietly. When she approached, they stopped talking. The Fed nodded in greeting and looked her over. "Did something happen?" she asked. "People talk," Orville replied. "What?" "James was seen at the North Gully. The lawmen are looking all over the county for him." The Fed stepped closer. "Do you know anything, miss?" "No, not at all. He left here years ago, and frankly, I'm not interested in his life." She didn't ask further, much less continue to talk about him. She pretended she was no longer interested, said goodbye politely, turned around, and walked away slowly. Those who are afraid run away. She knew that. It was cold at home. The stove was almost cold. She lit it again without taking off her coat. There's a stone on the windowsill, smooth, tarnished, a silent sign, the kind they used to throw in the river when they played toadstool. She realized he's out there somewhere. Maybe he knows he's being hunted. She sat by the window, gun on her lap, a look into the darkness, and realizing this night is not about peace. What if he doesn't know they're looking for him? The fire crackled. The snow thickened behind the glass. She waited, like a woman, as a human being, and that already meant a lot. He came toward morning. The sky was still gray, like cold iron. Evelyn sat at the window, her fingers on the gun, her eyes on the yard, on the void. When she saw his silhouette in the snowdrifts, she got up at once. She came to the door only when he came close. He was on his feet, but moving heavily. His coat was soaked. His right arm was pressed to his side. The blood was darkening on the fabric. She opened the door. He didn't say a word, just stood there. She pointed the barrel at him for a few seconds. Then she lowered it. "Come in." He stepped inside. Cold went in with him. She locked the door without looking. "Sit down." He sat down on a bench against the wall, lips tight, breathing shallowly. Pain held him upright like a spoke in his spine. Where did it happen? Behind the bridge, by the ravine. Who did it, the lawmen? No, old friends of mine. They've been making a mess in the neighboring state and our county recently, on the run. Something went wrong in a raid, and now they're looking for everybody. They offered to come back and help, but I said no, said I wanted to start a new life, and they knew I had something saved up. I'd been saving for a long time, and now that I'm all alone with it, they decided to shake me down. A shootout? I had to. I got 2 of them. Then I went through the ravine, came to the upper path. Anyway, I got away, but not without a fight. He looked down at the floor. He spoke slowly. His voice sounded like he was tearing up. She silently fetched water. She cut open his shirt. She took a bandage and began to treat the wound. The bullet grazed the side, but it missed the bone. He didn't moan. Only his fingers trembled when I rinsed them with cold water. "Not for long," she said. You have to leave. They're looking for you everywhere, thinking you had something to do with the recent events." "I will." "Where to?" He looked at her, tired, straight. "I don't know, just not far." She finished the bandage. Tight. He grimaced but didn't move away. Then he added, "I still have everything there, under the willow tree, the chest. You know where it is. It's all yours if you need it. I want you to take the trunk. Can you do that?" She nodded. Didn't say thank you. Didn't ask why. Those words didn't matter to her now. She was worried about his condition. Just looked, the way she had once looked, and it seemed like goodbye forever. But the man was still there. He stayed up till dawn, fell asleep by the stove. She didn't lie down. She just sat there, listened to his slow breathing. She came up once and adjusted the blanket, and then she kept him quiet. When morning cut through the glass, he got up, stood in the doorway, holding on to the wall. "I'm sorry," I said. "For everything. I'm sorry it's too late." "You need to leave," she replied. "While you can." He didn't argue. He walked out, locked it behind him, without a backward glance. An hour later, the uninvited guests arrived. 2 were in uniform. The 3rd was Orville. He stood by the porch, rubbing his gloves. "We're looking for James Ward. We got a tip he was in the area. Have you seen him?" "No," she replied. "Are you sure?" She was standing straight. There was a blood stain under her boot. She shifted her foot so that it faded into the shadows. "He left here years ago. I have nothing more to say to you." They stood for a moment. One looked around the room. The other looked at her face. "If you see him, tell us. He's a wanted man." "The last thing in the world I'd want to see is him. Have a good day, gentlemen." Closed the door and exhaled. They left. Orville lingered. He looked through the window as if he were seeing her for the first time. Then he lowered his eyes and left the courtyard the same way. When all was quiet, she cleaned up the trail of blood on the floor, walked over to the stove, opened the damper. There, in the corner, it was still warm. She touched the tiles with her palm. She sat down quietly and fell asleep. He's gone. But he didn't disappear. She knew it wasn't about running away. He wasn't saying goodbye, which means he'll be back. It was snowing without a sound. Dense, even, as if he knew that everything had to be replaced, both the old and the things that hadn't happened yet. Evelyn woke up by the stove. Her back was stiff. The room was quiet. There was nothing left of the night in the house but the faint odor of blood. She got up slowly, looked at the window. It was white behind it. Not a mark, not a line. It was as if no one had ever come. She knew he was gone. He was gone for real. But she didn't believe he was gone forever. All she wanted was for him to be okay, so he could start over. The day passed in silence. The other half went to housework. Wounded thoughts did not prevent her from moving. On the 3rd day she went to the ravine. No rush, no hesitation. Under an old willow tree, in the very place where the ground remembered everything, she found the chest. The snow was flat. Only she knew where to dig. The rifle still lay there. It was just as he had said, and she decided to do as he wished. She didn't open it on the spot, took everything with her, tied it to the saddle, rode back slowly. There was a crosswind. Rumors about him disappeared as quickly as those who brought them. Orville never appeared again. The town returned to its own. People began to say hello again, real greetings, and discussing some domestic matters, some other topics. In the spring, she expanded the farm. She brought back what she had once had to sell. She reintroduced cattle, renovated the fence, paid off her debts, paid Abigail's school fees. The stove burned better. I had enough wood for several winters. The chest was in the bottom drawer of the dresser. She touched it less and less often. Life became smoother, quieter. But she knew he was in there somewhere, and how his choices had affected all of this. How the only one he'd given a real new life to was her. Sometimes she sat by the window, like that, without the gun, no fear, no waiting, just because it was easier to keep herself in control that way. And I'd stare off into the distance, thinking. She lived. And every day she looked back less and less, sometimes only on footprints in the snow that no one else saw. Until one fine day, when on the windowsill she found the smooth, flat stone again. Dear friends, what did you think of Evelyn and James, a woman who stayed and a man who once left, only to return as someone different? It's a story about how hard it is to forgive when it already feels too late, about how even pain can leave behind not just a scar, but room for something new. Why do you think he came back, and what happens if he ever does again? Let us know what you felt at the end. If stories like this speak to you, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. There's more to come from places where snow hides more than it seems.